The first time he noticed it, he told himself it was just a busy day. The phone sat quietly on the small wooden table beside his chair, the same place it had rested every evening for years. Usually by this time at least one call would have come. Sometimes his daughter during her drive home from work, sometimes his son while walking the dog, occasionally a quick video call from his grandchildren, their faces filling the screen while they argued about who got to talk first. But that evening, the phone stayed silent. "Hello, everyone. I'm really glad you're here today. I want to share a story that might feel familiar to some of you, and maybe a little uncomfortable for others. It's about a man named Harold. In the quiet day, he realized something had changed in his life in a way he hadn't expected. Harold was 74 years old and lived in the same small house where he had raised his children. The house had aged along with him. The paint around the windows had begun to fade, and the garden that once bloomed with his wife's roses now held mostly green weeds and stubborn patches of soil. Still, it was home. Every evening Harold followed the same routine. Around 5 o'clock he made himself a cup of tea, the kind he used to make for his wife when she was still alive. He carried the cup carefully to the living room and sat in the old armchair beside the window. The chair had molded to the shape of his back after so many years. Next to him, always within reach, was his phone. For years the evenings had been full of small interruptions. "Hey, Dad, just checking in." "Hi, Grandpa, look what I drew today." "Dad, do you remember that recipe Mom used to make?" Short calls, small conversations, nothing extraordinary. But they filled the house with sound. And then, slowly, they didn't. At first it was subtle. A missed day here. A quick text instead of a call. "Busy today. Talk tomorrow." Tomorrow usually came. Until one day, it didn't. That particular Tuesday evening, Harold sat in his chair with his tea and looked at the phone screen. 6 o'clock passed, then 7. The tea had long since gone cold. He picked up the phone once, just to check if the volume was still on. It was. He set it down again. Harold wasn't the type of man who complained. His children had good lives. His son Michael lived in another city and worked long hours managing a construction company. His daughter Lisa had 3 children and a calendar that looked permanently full. Life gets busy, Harold often told himself. He believed that. But belief doesn't stop silence from feeling loud. The next day he tried something different. Around 6 in the evening he decided to call Michael himself. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Hey, Dad," the message said cheerfully. "I'm probably in the middle of something. Leave a message and I'll call you back." Harold hesitated for a moment after the beep. "Hi, son. Just thought I'd see how you're doing," he said quietly. "No rush. Call whenever you have time." He hung up and placed the phone back on the table. The call didn't come that night, or the next day. A week later, Michael finally returned the call while Harold was outside watering the garden hose into a patch of dirt that had once been full of roses. By the time Harold reached the phone, it had already stopped ringing. He stared at the missed call notification for a long moment before putting the phone back in his pocket. It was strange how quickly a routine could disappear. Years earlier, Harold had been the busiest person in the family. He worked long shifts as a mechanic, coached Michael's little league games on weekends, and spent evenings helping Lisa with her homework at the kitchen table. There had been noise everywhere back then. Laughter, arguments, footsteps running down the hallway. Sometimes Harold would close his eyes and still hear those echoes inside the house. Now the loudest sound most evenings was the ticking clock above the television. One afternoon, while cleaning out a kitchen drawer, Harold found something he hadn't seen in years. A small stack of folded drawings, crayon pictures, stick figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. At the bottom of one drawing, written in uneven letters, were the words, "I love you, Dad." Harold sat down at the table and smiled softly. He remembered the day Lisa had given him that drawing. She had been 6 years old and incredibly proud of the spelling. Back then she had called him every single day, even after she left for college. The phone rang constantly in those years. It was strange to think how something so ordinary could quietly fade away. A few days later, Harold walked to the grocery store down the street. He liked walking there. It gave him a reason to move and a chance to see people. While standing in line, he noticed a young father with two small children in the cart. One of them was tugging on the man's sleeve, asking question after question. "Daddy, why is the sky blue? Daddy, can we get ice cream?" The father laughed and answered patiently. Harold watched the scene with gentle amusement. Then something unexpected happened. The little girl turned around and smiled at him. "Hi," she said brightly. Harold smiled back. "Hello there." It was such a small moment, but it warmed something inside him that had been quiet for a long time. That evening, when Harold returned home, he sat in his chair again with his tea. The phone rested beside him as always. But for the first time in weeks, he didn't stare at it. Instead, he looked out the window at the fading sunlight and thought about something he had realized at the grocery store. Life hadn't stopped. It had simply moved. His children were now living the busy lives he had once lived himself. The rushing schedules, the responsibilities, the constant pull of work and family. Maybe the silence wasn't meant to be a sign of distance. Maybe it was simply the rhythm of time. The next morning, Harold did something he hadn't done in years. He baked a batch of cookies. His wife used to make them for the grandchildren, but Harold had never tried the recipe himself. The first batch came out a little too brown, but they smelled wonderful. He packed them into a tin box and drove to Lisa's house. When she opened the door, her expression shifted from surprise to guilt in a matter of seconds. "Dad, I was just thinking about calling you," she said quickly. Harold chuckled softly. "I thought I'd beat you to it." The grandchildren rushed into the hallway when they smelled the cookies. Within minutes, the house was full of noise again. Sticky fingers, laughter, and crumbs on the floor. Lisa hugged him in the kitchen while the kids argued over who got the biggest cookie. "I'm sorry I haven't called as much," she whispered. "Life has just been busy," Harold finished gently. He smiled at her in the same calm way he had when she was a child. "I know." That evening, when Harold returned home, the house felt a little different. Not louder exactly, but lighter. Around 7 o'clock, his phone rang. It was Michael. "Hey, Dad," his son said. "I realized I haven't checked in properly for a while. How are you doing?" Harold leaned back in his chair and looked at the fading sky outside the window. "I'm doing just fine," he said. And for the first time in a long while, he truly meant it. Sometimes in life, silence doesn't mean love has disappeared. It just means people are moving through their own busy chapters of the story. But a small effort, a simple call, or even a tin of slightly overbaked cookies can open the door again. If this story reminded you of someone in your life today, maybe take a moment after this video to reach out to them. A short conversation can mean more than we realize. And if you enjoy quiet, heartfelt stories like this, you're always welcome to join us again. Until next time, take care of the people who once made your world feel full of noise.